All right, welcome everybody to the Lakers Legacy Podcast, where unfortunately the Wolf Pack had the Lakers packing early for Cancun. And now it's time to start planning for the offseason. For big changes could be on the horizon as the true start of the Luka era begins. I'm your host, Jonathan Hernandez, and I am once again riding solo for today's episode because Tommy is busy, and we're honestly both still depressed about how that series went down. And we both just needed a beat and some separation from this Lakers team to collect our thoughts. So, yeah, it's just going to be me today again. Tommy will be back next week when we do our post mortem on this series and this season. But for today's episode, I will give my final thoughts on Game 5 and the Wolves series as a whole, and also get into some of my biggest quote unquote what ifs for the Lakers in this Timberwolves series. So the Lakers season is over. The Lakers lost in 5, 1-4 against the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Lakers started this season off versus this same Minnesota Timberwolves team, and they literally ended their season versus the Timberwolves, but in two entirely different ways, with two entirely different vibes and two entirely different rosters. I was actually just watching the Lakers season opener versus the Wolves back in October, and just to see D'Angelo Russell lobbing it up to Jackson Hayes and watching Max Christie playing rotation minutes and Anthony Davis blocking the hell out of Rudy Gobert, I just couldn't believe that this was the same season. As Austin Reeves has said, this season has felt like 5 different years, 5 different seasons. But yeah, to quickly recap the Lakers Game 5 elimination game at Crypto, honestly, it was disappointing. It was demoralizing. At times, I kind of felt like it was a disrespectful performance by the Lakers, but after having a couple of days to collect myself and then hearing the news that Austin Reeves was dealing with this toe injury and LeBron James is banged up, Luka Doncic was banged up, I honestly can't blame the Lakers too much or hammer them too much for how that game 5 ended, because it just sort of felt like the Lakers' morale and belief was completely zapped by the time game 5 came along. Now, that's not an excuse. They're playing in their hometown. The crypto crowd paid a ton of money to go to that playoff game. They should have showed up. But contextualizing how the series went, you also kind of understand how they got to the place of futility that they did. And even when the Lakers took the lead in the fourth off of that Luka Doncic like fadeaway mid-range jump shot on Jaden McDaniels, I also kind of felt like it was a futile venture. The whole time I was watching, I was like, okay, so even if the Lakers win this game, then what? There's no way this team, looking as tired and ragged as they do, is going to find a way to win this series. And do they really want to fly back out to Minnesota only to potentially get blown out? They looked so overmatched physically and athletically. And credit the Lakers for doing a valiant job fighting back against Minnesota's physicality through the first 3 or 4 games. But when you lose the way that the Lakers lost in games 3 and game 4, when they did a good job keeping it close all the way till the very end, and when it comes to game 4, doing a good job of holding the lead throughout the entire game, when you lose the way the Lakers lost in games 3 and game 4 and only have one win to show for all of that effort, it's hard to muster up the will to continue when you know you're already overmatched on a fundamental level physically against this Timberwolves team. And so ultimately, I think this is less about what the Lakers did or didn't do and more about how good the Minnesota Timberwolves were in this series, because they literally just stole the Lakers' will from them, yanked it out of their heart, yanked their hearts out of their chest to the point where the Lakers were just screaming uncle by the end of it. So credit the Minnesota Timberwolves for being relentless in their smash 'em, bash 'em sort of play and physicality, but also credit them for being the smarter and better coached basketball team. Those were two things, particularly the basketball IQ side of things, that I thought the Minnesota Timberwolves were lacking in, and I thought an area where the Lakers would have had the advantage, but they clearly didn't, and The Lakers were not only physically outmatched, but they were also mentally outclassed by the Timberwolves. And also, again, with the news of AR dealing with a toe injury and LeBron sustaining that MCL injury against Dante DiVincenzo in game 5 that would have kept him out the next game, hearing all of that, it kind of just feels like the series was inevitable with all of the injury pileups. And it just wasn't meant to be this year. That kind of allows me to accept our fate a little better, even though it still stung and you wish that we hadn't flamed out the way that we had flamed out, considering how good we looked towards the end in the regular season. All right, so now I want to get into some of my biggest what ifs for the Lakers in this series. Pushing the injuries and banged up factor to the side, what other things could the Lakers have controlled in this series that maybe would have allowed them to not only extend it, but even win it? Some of these are going to sound obvious. I will start with the obvious what ifs first, and then I'll go into the not so obvious theoreticals. So let me start with the very, very first obvious what if of this series. What if Luka Doncic hadn't gotten the stomach flu in game 3 and wasn't throwing up all over the Minnesota Timberwolves arena? If Luka was even just 85% healthy in this game and moving like he normally moved, the Lakers probably win game 3 and take advantage of LeBron's insane three-point shooting night. Maybe if Luka's healthy, LeBron doesn't go off for 38 points, but it was clear that LeBron had his shot that night. So he would have at least had like 27 points and a flurry of threes. But the biggest thing about Luka's injury that sort of derailed the Lakers the rest of the series was it totally cut off all of their momentum. They just had a pretty solid defensive win at home at Crypto, and they were sort of riding that momentum into game 3. And to have this wrench thrown into everything by having your best offensive player all of a sudden go down with a flu bug that zapped him of all of his energy and life, I feel like that was probably the biggest hurdle that the Lakers had to overcome, because being down 1-2 with another game in Minnesota, that was just a tough hill to climb. And if the Lakers had won game 3, then they would have entered game 4 up 2-1. They probably would have had a renewed belief that they could beat this team. Maybe they come into game 4 with even more defensive engagement and effort and focus. And even in spite of all that, they did come into game 4 with all of those things, and they almost eked out game 4 as well. But just saying that, I feel like the slippery slope started with that pivotal sliding doors moment. Because if the Lakers win game 3, they come back to LA at least tied 2-2, and momentum shifts to their side, and the series could go an entirely different way. So, not to belabor this point, but my biggest what if for this series is, what if Luka Doncic just hadn't gotten sick in game 3, a pivotal swing game? All right, for my second biggest what if of this series. What if JJ Redick hadn't gone full Galaxy Brain desperation mode in game 4 and hadn't played his starting 5 the full 24 minutes to end the game? What if the Lakers hadn't completely melted down in the 4th of game 4 and pulled out the win when, for the majority of that game, they held a double-digit lead versus the Timberwolves? You saw the energy and life that Vanderbilt brought to the team in game 5 when no one looked like they wanted to play except for Rui Hachimura. And he only ended up getting 6 minutes in game 4. You don't think he could have done that for the team in game 4 for at least 4 minutes at the end of the 3rd into the start of the 4th when everyone was gassed as hell? I think we will always look back on this series and wonder, what if JJ Redick hadn't panicked, even though we understand why he played Dorian Finney-Smith, Rui Hachimura, Austin Reeves, LeBron James, and Luka Doncic for the entire second half, even if we can justify why he went that direction? That was the first time in NBA playoff history during the shot clock era that any coach has ever done that. So for a rookie head coach like JJ Redick to pull that out of his pocket at that moment with a 40-year-old LeBron, with a Luka Doncic who's been injured for half of the season and was recovering from a stomach flu, And now knowing that Austin Reeves was dealing with this toe injury, it makes JJ Redick's decision to run with that unit and run them into the ground look even worse. Everyone was banged up except for Rui Hachimura and DFS. What if JJ Redick had just played Jared Vanderbilt for a 5-minute stretch and gotten Luka or LeBron or Austin a little bit of rest? The Lakers probably pull out game 4 because they were in control for 85% of that game, and we go back to Crypto.com Arena tied 2-2 with the belief that we can actually hang with this team. And we don't end up having that despicable showing in the first quarter of game 5 where it didn't look like we were ready to play playoff basketball. All right, moving on to my third what if. What if JJ Redick had actually had a plan for Jackson Hayes from the get-go and planned to stick with him through his struggles instead of bailing on him so early and so soon? Because even from game 1, we saw that JJ Redick did not have full belief in Jackson Hayes. Because Jackson Hayes was not terrible in game 1, and yet he only played 8 minutes. And from there, it only got worse and worse. And I'm not saying Jackson Hayes isn't culpable. He did not play well in the minutes that he played, especially after game 1. He looked undisciplined. He looked soft at the rim. He was allowing the refs to get to his head. He was fouling a lot. I'm not saying Jackson Hayes played well. I'm just saying JJ Redick didn't do Jackson Hayes any favors to start this series off. And it's sort of a chicken or egg argument for me. What if JJ Redick had planned to give Jackson Hayes a longer leash? What if JJ Redick had an intentional plan to use him more purposefully every second he was out on the court? I counted the number of screens and pick and roll plays that Jackson Hayes was involved in game 1, and it was very paltry in comparison to how they were using Jackson Hayes in the regular season. What if JJ Redick had actually believed in Jackson Hayes from the get-go and promised him at least 12 minutes a game, a number that he wasn't able to reach in any single game this series? Maybe Jackson Hayes, under that belief, wouldn't have been so pressed and undisciplined every time he played on the court, because he played like a frantic dude who was looking over his shoulder at his coach every possession and knew he'd only get 6 to 8 minutes a night and be yanked at the first sign of his first mistake. The Lakers thrived post-Luka AD trade in the regular season, with Jackson Hayes playing 25 minutes a game and averaging 8.6 points, 6.4 rebounds, and 1.4 blocks on a stellar 74% from the field. To all of a sudden have that element completely removed from our team in the playoffs, you understand how and why the Lakers lost the way that they did. You can't just remove 25 minutes of that type of dynamic, energetic play from your unit and expect them to function in the same way or function productively. Yes, Jackson Hayes didn't do himself any favors, but JJ Redick also didn't believe in his own player from the start. JJ Redick played Jackson Hayes as if he knew Jackson Hayes was going to suck. And guess what? Jackson Hayes ended up sucking. It was self-fulfilling prophecy on JJ Redick's end. Instead of wish casting Jackson Hayes into being a Daniel Gafford, Derek Lively sort of proxy, JJ Redick curse casted Jackson Hayes into being a stupid big who would be played off of the court, the same sort of big that the New Orleans Pelicans gave up on, and that's what Jackson Hayes ended up looking like. So yeah, what if JJ Redick had actually believed a little bit more in Jackson Hayes and actually had a purposeful plan for him every single minute he was out on the court? Maybe this series would have looked a little different, and maybe the Lakers would have actually had another release valve at the rim. Maybe they actually could have had some easy buckets in the paint to remove an aerial lob threat from Luka Doncic's pick and roll arsenal. To me, is insane. And again, Jackson Hayes was a huge part of why the Lakers made it to the number 3 seed in the regular season. To nullify that on your own roster, I don't know. I feel like that's kind of insane. And also, the most underrated thing that Jackson Hayes brings to this team is whenever he gets an insane alley-oop lob or throws down a sledgehammer dunk, it really gets the crowd going and it really drums up momentum for this team that is so lacking in any sort of explosiveness and athleticism outside of a few guys. So removing that element from the table as well, You understand why the Lakers end up looking so sluggish, slow, and old. All right, so those are my first three kind of obvious what ifs of this series. Why don't we take it to break here? And when we return, I'll get into some of my more quirkier, darker, horsier what ifs. All right, so we are back. Now let's get into some of my quirkier what ifs of this series. And let's start here. What if the Lakers actually had a plan for Christian Koko and Trey Jameson besides just making them practice bigs on two-way contracts? What if the Lakers had actually signed anyone else other than Alex Len? So, this what if is about the Lakers' emergency backup big depth. What if the Lakers actually had emergency backup big depth? The fact that they didn't have an insurance big man off the bench, regardless of how inexperienced and raw you may think Koko and Jameson are, because they are inexperienced and raw, they could have at least helped on the boards for 3 minutes a game. And maybe if JJ Redick had invested in any one of these bigs throughout the season, they would have been better prepared to at least spell some guys in the playoffs. To spell a Jackson Hayes that you don't believe in because he's fouling out in 4 minutes. But JJ Redick was insistent on a certain type of play when he entered this series, that play being small ball, and the Lakers came up short, quite literally, because we had no 7-footers. We had no rebounders, no guys to eat up space in the paint. And for me, what was the point of the Lakers signing Christian Koko to this two-way deal at the start of the season? This dude has been a part of our program from the beginning of the season. He was killing it with the South Bay Lakers, averaging 3.4 blocks a game. What was the point of all that if we didn't have any plans to actually use him? What was the plan of signing Trey Jameson late in the season to a two-way deal and actually giving him some run, only to then pull the rug out from beneath his feet and not play him at all? Because both of these players in limited minutes showed flashes. And I understand the inexperience. I understand JJ Redick wouldn't have trusted them. But you're telling me they can't play for 3 minutes at the start of the second quarter to just get some more fouls, bang some dudes around, pause, get some rebounds? The Lakers had such a size deficit that I think Koko and Trey Jameson would have helped. And then on the Alex Len front, don't even get me started on what Rob Pelinka said about Alex Len and how he quote unquote deserved to be on this roster. Why keep Alex Len on this contract to just sit on the bench if you're not going to make use of his veteran centerness? And I'm not saying I wanted to see Alex Len play. I'm just saying signing him in the first place was a huge mistake. And then on top of it, doubling down on that signing by not cutting him for somebody else was also a mistake. I don't care about the agent relations and playing nice with his agent because they promised to sign him. The dude got a prorated veteran minimum contract that he didn't deserve. And if the Lakers had prioritized a guy like Bismack Biyombo instead, who ended up signing on a 10-day with the Spurs, instead of fully guaranteeing Alex Len to a veteran minimum contract for the rest of the season, they would have been much better off. Bismack Biyombo absolutely could have helped in this series. Instead, we were stuck with Alex Len on the bench. So next season, how about we actually properly develop the young 7-footers we bring into our program and start to build that trust in them? Or even let them sink and swim a little. Because otherwise, what was the point of all of this, of having these guys in early? Again, I felt like we wasted this Christian Koko season. And now Christian Koko is not even two-way eligible anymore. If the Lakers want him back, they're going to have to sign into a veteran minimum contract this summer, I believe. All right, moving on to my next what if. What if the Lakers had actually let their prized first-round pick in Dalton Knecht play for even just one shift a game? Give him 4 minutes to start the second quarter out. See if he can help the Lakers ignite their sputtering offense. You know, the guy who set the rookie record for most threes in a game and scored 37 points, hit 9 threes. The guy who dropped 30-plus points on the Denver Nuggets in a road game without LeBron and Luka and almost helped the team pull the win out. The guy who turned his season around after the Mark Williams trade debacle and proved to JJ Redick that he deserved a spot in the rotation. We all understand Dalton Knecht's defensive deficiencies. We all understand his inexperience. We all understand why JJ Redick would have been hesitant to trust him in such a high leverage physical game against the Timberwolves. But come on, what was the point of reintegrating Dalton Connect back into the rotation to close the season out and watching him gain his groove back only to not use him at all in the playoffs, even in an experimental fashion? And even worse, to then trust a guy like Maxi Kleber in an elimination game, a guy who hasn't played in 3 months and wasn't with this team till February, to trust Maxi Kleber over the rookie you groomed and developed the entire year, the rookie who plays exactly like you but more athletic. We gave Maxi Kleber a shot over Dalton Connect, a Maxi Kleber who we are probably going to shop because he is on an expiring $11 million contract. You don't think Dalton Connect could have used 4 minutes of actual playoff experience that will help him down the line? To put things into perspective, in the 3 minutes of garbage time that Dalton Connect played in this series, he scored 5 points. Gabe Vincent, in like 96 minutes, only scored 9 more points than Dalton Connect in this series. So you can say all you want about Dalton Connect's terrible defense. I can guarantee you if Dalton Connect had gotten 10 minutes in this series, he probably would have scored 10 points. So yeah, if Dalton Connect is still here next season, how about we do a better job of actually developing him and trusting him? And the biggest thing for me was we actually got to a point where he bust through his rookie wall, proved that he could play for 5 to 10 minutes in a game and be a reliable rotation player. I understand that a lot of him coming back into the rotation coincided with Rui Hachimura being out, but I thought he held up well and proved that he could be trusted. But to then take all of that momentum that he had gained and completely snuff it out by not giving him any run in the playoffs, I feel like that was a missed opportunity for JJ Redick and the Lakers. And if we're not going to utilize Dalton Connect, then yeah, let's just trade him. And maybe that is what's going to happen this summer. Speaking of trading Dalton Connect, what if the Lakers had let the Mark Williams trade go through? Surely a competent 7-footer who can at least rebound would help. And for this one, I'll kind of answer a bit differently because yes, I agree Mark Williams would have helped, especially when it comes to cleaning up possessions and grabbing rebounds, and especially giving Luka a pick and roll lob threat or even just a roll threat to the rim. I agree that Mark Williams would have helped. But my question is, to what extent? Because I don't think Mark Williams would have helped enough to the point where we actually overcame the Timberwolves in this series. Because Mark Williams is just as undisciplined and soft as Hayes defensively. I think Mark Williams would have gotten eaten alive by the Wolves. Mark Williams is a drop big defensively who doesn't have the same mobility as Jackson Hayes on the perimeter, and the Wolves would have just annihilated him in the pull-up mid-range game and from the three-point line. And so, yeah, I agree. It would have helped to have another 7-foot body in the paint to deter shots, but Mark isn't a good rim protector. And because he can't shoot, we also would have lost spacing on the other end as well and would have run into the same issues that JJ did with Jackson Hayes. So, again, I think Mark Williams would have helped, but I don't think it would have mattered. And I'd rather not be out Dalton Connect and another first-round pick and be locked into this Mark Williams era with Luka Doncic for the foreseeable future. I would rather use those assets for other things and get another crack this summer at getting a less flawed and injury-prone center. I want another crack at getting the center we actually want, even though I know Luka Doncic said that he preferred Mark Williams on a list of bigs. But Mark Williams, again, isn't the most healthiest center, and he's extremely flawed. So even though Mark Williams would have marginally helped in this series, I'm glad we didn't get him because I feel like the loss was going to be inevitable anyways, and I'm glad we at least have Dalton Connect and another first to use as assets for the big that we actually want. All right, for my last what if, this might be a sensitive topic for some, but I'm going to caveat myself heavily. But what if the Lakers still had Anthony Davis instead of Luka Doncic and the trade had never gone through? Would the Lakers have won this series? Now, I'm not saying I don't want Luka Doncic on this team. I'm not saying I'm ungrateful for what Luka Doncic has done. I'm not saying that I don't want to move forward with the Luka Doncic era. I'm just using this as a hypothetical, theoretical exercise to talk about the specific matchup between the Lakers and Timberwolves. I'm not even talking about what would have happened if the Lakers hadn't made that trade. Would the Lakers have ended up in the third spot? Would they have dropped into the play-in? I'm just talking about Lakers Timberwolves. What if the Lakers had Anthony Davis and Max Christie instead of Luka Doncic? Would the Lakers have won? Let's say everything's equal between AD and Luka health-wise, and they're both semi-banged up. Against this particular Timberwolves team, if you add Anthony Davis and Max Christie to this roster, along with DFS, Rui Hachimura, et cetera, and everything else was the same, I think the Lakers would have had a better shot, if not a shot to win this series. They would have been able to match up with the Timberwolves' griminess and physicality. AD would have been able to nullify Gobert lineups, and he would have been able to nullify non-Gobert lineups. And he would have given the Lakers a legit post presence in the paint to go to, a real aerial lob threat that they were missing all series. He would have been a huge rim deterrent and at the very least cleaned up half of all of our possessions. We would have suffered offensively for sure without Luka Doncic's shot creation, but we suffered offensively anyway. So might as well have bolstered up our defense and physicality to fight back. And again, the other component to this is we would have had Max Christie as well, which would have been huge. We could have put him on Anthony Edwards to make life more difficult for Ant. Instead, we would have had another legitimate three-point spot-up shooter on the perimeter. And so, yeah, again, I'm not saying I'd rather have Anthony Davis and Max Christie at this point. I'm fully ready to wave my Luka Doncic flag and go straight head on into the Luka Doncic era. I just think it's an interesting question to raise with regards to this particular matchup because, again, I rewatched our opening game against the Timberwolves, and Anthony Davis dominated that game. And the Timberwolves had no answers for him. Again, Anthony Davis is the ultimate utility star. You can use him in any lineup configuration. If you want to play big, if you want to play small, Anthony Davis would have been the answer to everything the Timberwolves would have tried to throw at us. And obviously, in an ideal world, you'd have Anthony Davis and Luka Doncic together because they would be the perfect pairing with one another. But alas, Anthony Davis is not here, Max Christie isn't here, but we do have Luka Doncic, and we are happy that he's here. We're happy that he's a Laker. We hope that he signs that extension this upcoming summer. And frankly, as far as the Lakers are concerned, it is all about Luka Doncic moving forward, and we have to continue building the team out in that way, even if we have to tear things to the studs. All right, with that said, that'll do it for this episode. Went on longer than I expected. Those are my what ifs, from the most obvious to the quirky. Nobody get sensitive about this stuff, please. I'm still processing the end of this season. Again, I'll have Tommy back next week as we go through a more coherent deep dive into the post-mortem of how that series ended, of how this series went, and what we're looking forward to this offseason as we begin our offseason coverage, which is some of my favorite coverage of the season, when we dive into some trade options, some free agent options, et cetera, et cetera. But till then, thank you guys for listening. Please remember to follow us on X at Lakers Legacy Pod. Most importantly, please remember to subscribe to our podcast feed, but also subscribe to our YouTube channel at Lakers Legacy Pod. This has been Jonathan Hernandez of the Lakers Legacy Pod, and I will catch you guys next time. Peace.